Hi, I'm David Baldacci. I'm the author of the Aloysius Archer series. Aloysius Archer is the protagonist of my latest series, and in this video I'm going to talk a little bit about his character, the historical setting, and some of the other facets about the narrative and the stories. I'm a big Raymond Chandler and Ross McDonald fan. I love movies from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, Chinatown and the Big Sleep, movies like that. Back then, men were tough and women had to know their place, which was truly awful, but just the way it was back then. I also love history, and I got to do a lot of that, a lot of research for these books, because I'm writing about a time period when I wasn't even alive. In the 40s and 50s, after the Depression and the World War, Americans were on the move. They wanted a better life. They were sick and tired of being poor. They were sick and tired of being involved in a war that spread across the globe. They wanted to sort of pack everything up and just usually head west to try for a better life somewhere. And a lot of them ended up in California, which is where Aloysius Archer eventually does in the second book in the series. He wants to be a private investigator, a PI, a gumshoe, and a shamus, and that's his goal. In the first book, he was out of the army, he got into trouble, he had to go to prison for a little while, then he served his parole in a little town in the Midwest. That was in One Good Deed. He survived what happened to him then, and then he left, got on a bus, and headed to the West Coast via Reno, which is in the book coming out now called A Gambling Man. And he hooks up with an actress there, an aspiring actress, and they head to the West Coast, where he goes under the tutelage of Willie Dash, who's a very well-known veteran private investigator. And that really is where Archer learns how to be a shamus, how to be a gumshoe. Now, some of the cool things that I did while I was researching this novel, I mixed a lot of drinks from that era, everything from the sidecar to a highball to a Singapore sling to the pink squirrel. I won't recommend all of them, but hey, give it a shot. Life is to experiment. I wore a fedora sometimes while I was writing, just sort of for inspiration. I know that sounds kind of weird, but I had to learn a lot about clothes from that era, which people dressed to the nines back then. They were very careful and meticulous about what they wore, and they spent a lot of money on clothes. They didn't have a whole lot of clothes, but the ones they had, they kept in really good shape and they really cared about. I had to learn a lot about cars, and A Gambling Man, Archer picks up this incredibly costly, cool, one-of-a-kind Delahaye Model 165. The outside was designed by the French. The interior was designed by Italian. So it's just a beautiful car, blood red, convertible. So I had to learn a lot about that, and that was a lot of fun. A lot about the food they would eat back then. All the cigarettes they would smoke. I mean, when you read these books, you come away feeling like you need to be dry cleaned along with your clothes, because smoking was everywhere back then. The guns they used, mob was everywhere. Mobs controlled LA, mobs controlled Las Vegas, and other places like that. Wherever there was money to be made, the mob was there. The LAPD even had a sex squad division because of all the smut and pornography that was coming out of LA during the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And I also learned about Malibu because part of the book that I'm working on now, that'll be out next year, deals with Malibu. And Malibu, California, which is about a 30-mile ride from Los Angeles, was once owned by one family, sort of a Bible-thumping, very puritanical, religious family. They owned the entire area of Malibu, like 24, 25 miles of beach. And they wanted to keep everybody else out. They only wanted their family to enjoy it. Obviously, it did not work out that way, but they did their best, and they were in court for like 20 years over it and eventually lost everything. So the research and the history was just so cool. I enjoyed it so much, and I learned a lot about things that I thought I knew something about, but it turned out I really didn't know a lot about it at all. And this was a time period when my father was growing up. He fought in World War II. He started working in the 1950s, and so it was sort of neat to visit his era when he was a young man just starting out his life as well. So Archer, wants to be a private investigator. So it's a rough and tumble world where there are a lot of bad people and a lot of people with really dubious motivations and goals and hidden agendas. And what he needs to do, and all good detectives need to do, is be very tough and tenacious about trying to find the truth and sticking in there. It can be dangerous at times, and he gets into a lot of trouble along the way. But the funny thing about it is that detectives need to have a moral compass. They need to have sort of a moral underpinning. They deal with so many different bad people and good people who do bad things because they're in trouble and they feel like their back is against the wall. He has to have some center that keeps him sort of grounded. The truth is important to him. That's what detectives are trying to find, is the truth. So that's important to him. And that is sort of a moral underpinning. If you accept things as the truth because you know they're the truth, that's a positive thing. I wish we had more of that today, actually, in the world. So that's sort of an underpinning for him. He's a good guy, and he's working in a field that has a lot of bad players. And I think he wants to come out the other end of it whole. Still being the same guy that he was, but knowing that he really can't be, because this kind of work is going to change you. So I hope you enjoy the Archer series. I really am having a blast writing it. When I wrote One Good Deed, I wasn't sure it was going to be a series, but by the time I got to the end of the novel, I was like, this Archer guy has a lot of miles left in him. So I've written the second novel, A Gambling Man, that comes out in April of 2021, and I'm hard at work on the third novel, and there will be novels going forward after that. So I hope you enjoy Archer. I hope you enjoy reading about a time period that maybe you weren't alive in, or maybe you were, and it's nice to revisit that time period. But it was a lot of fun for me, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks.